Welcome back to our study of Matthew. We're diving into one of the most incredible miracles Jesus ever performed, a story that shows us what happens when our not enough meets his more than enough. It's a powerful reminder that with God, the impossible becomes possible, and our limitations are just opportunities for his power to be displayed. This isn't just an ancient tale, it's a lesson for our lives right now. So let's get into the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, and see how Jesus turns a moment of scarcity into an overflow of abundance. Let's read together from the New Living Translation, starting in Matthew chapter 14, verse 13. As soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. But the crowds heard where he was headed and followed on foot from many towns. Right away, we see the humanity of Jesus. He had just received devastating news his cousin and forerunner, John the Baptist, had been executed. Imagine the grief and the weight of that loss. His natural response was to seek solitude, to get away and process, to be with his Father. He gets in a boat to find a quiet, remote place. But his reputation preceded him. The people were so desperate for hope, for healing, for a touch from God, that they couldn't let him go. They heard where he was headed and literally chased after him on foot, coming from all the surrounding towns. This wasn't a casual stroll. It was a determined pursuit. They were hungry for what only Jesus could offer. Let's continue with verse 14. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. This verse is so powerful. Jesus, in his own moment of grief and exhaustion, steps off the boat, and what's his first reaction? Not annoyance, not frustration, but compassion. The Greek word for compassion here means to be moved in one's innermost being. He felt their pain, their needs, their desperation deep in his gut, and he didn't just feel for them. He acted. He immediately began to heal their sick. He put his own need for solitude aside to meet their needs first. This is the heart of our Savior, a heart that is always moved by our needs, a heart overflowing with love and compassion, even when he himself was hurting. Now let's look at verse 15. That evening the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy food for themselves." The sun is starting to set, there in the middle of nowhere. The disciples, being practical and logical, see a major problem brewing. They have a massive crowd, thousands of people, and no infrastructure. No food, no shops, no way to care for them. Their solution is logical. Dismiss the problem, send them away, let them fend for themselves. From a human perspective, this makes perfect sense. It was the most reasonable course of action. They identified the problem hunger and proposed a solution that removed the responsibility from their shoulders. They were thinking in terms of scarcity and logistics. But Jesus operates on a completely different level. Let's read verse 16. But Jesus said, "That isn't necessary you feed them." Can you imagine being one of the disciples at that moment? You've just pointed out a massive logistical nightmare, and Jesus looks at you and says, "You handle it. You feed them." This statement must have sounded absolutely absurd. It was a command that was completely impossible from their point of view. Jesus wasn't just ignoring their practical concerns. He was challenging their perspective. He was shifting the focus from the problem to the potential. He was inviting them to participate in the miracle he was about to perform. He wanted them to see that their limitations weren't the end of the story. Their response in verse 17 is exactly what we'd expect. "But we have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." They answered. They immediately take inventory of their lack. They look at what they have, and it's next to nothing. 5 small barley loaves and 2 little fish. This was probably a boy's lunch. It wasn't even enough to feed the 12 of them, let alone a crowd of thousands upon thousands. Their answer is filled with a sense of helplessness. This is all we have. It's not enough. What you're asking is impossible. How often do we do this in our own lives? God calls us to something, and our first response is to list all the reasons why we can't do it, to point out our lack of resources, time, talent, or money. The disciples were stuck looking at their own empty hands. Now watch how Jesus responds to their lack in verse 18. "Bring them here," he said. Jesus doesn't scold them. For their lack of faith, he doesn't dismiss their meager offering. Instead, he says, "Bring what you have to me." This is the turning point of the entire miracle. Jesus doesn't create food out of thin air. He starts with what they have, no matter how small or insignificant it seems. He invites their participation. He asks them to give him the very thing they believe is inadequate. This is a profound principle for our lives. God doesn't ask for what we don't have. He asks for what we do have. He wants us to bring our 5 loaves and to fish, our small talents, our limited resources, our little bit of faith, and place it in his hands. Let's see what happens next in verse 19. Then he told the people to sit down on the grass. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up toward heaven, and blessed them. Then, breaking the loaves into pieces, he gave the bread to the disciples, who distributed it to the people. There's so much happening here. First, Jesus brings order to the chaos. He has the people sit down in groups. This isn't just for organization. It's an act of faith. He's preparing them to receive a meal that doesn't exist yet. Then he takes the bread and fish. He holds up this ridiculously small amount of food before thousands of hungry people, looks up to heaven, and gives thanks. He blesses it. He acknowledges that the source of all provision is his Father in heaven. He models gratitude and dependence on God. Then he breaks the bread and gives it to the disciples. Notice he doesn't hand it out himself. He gives it to the disciples and they distribute it. The very ones who said it can't be done are now the channels of his miraculous provision. Let's read the amazing result in verse 20. They all ate as much as they wanted, and afterward the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. This is the beautiful overflow of God's economy. It wasn't just a small snack for everyone. They all ate and were satisfied. They ate until they were full. No one went away hungry. The provision wasn't just sufficient. It was abundant, and the miracle doesn't even stop there. After everyone has eaten their fill, Jesus tells the disciples to gather the leftovers, and what do they find? 12 baskets full, one for each of the disciples who initially doubted. It's as if Jesus was giving them a tangible reminder of the miracle. They started with almost nothing, and they ended with more than they had in the beginning, even after feeding thousands. This is the nature of our God. He doesn't just meet our needs. He provides in abundance with an overflow that leaves us in awe. And finally, verse 21 gives us the scale of this event. About 5,000 men were fed that day, in addition to all the women and children. The number 5,000 only counted the men. Most scholars estimate the actual crowd was likely between 15,000 and 20,000 people. Let that sink in. With a boy's lunch, Jesus fed a crowd the size of a small city. So what does this incredible story mean for us today? First, it shows us the immense compassion of Jesus. He sees our needs and he is moved. He cares about our physical hunger just as much as our spiritual hunger. Never think your problem is too small or insignificant for him. Second, it teaches us how to respond when we feel overwhelmed and inadequate. The disciples saw a huge problem and their own limited resources. Their solution was to send the problem away. Jesus' instruction was simple. Bring what you have to me. God is not asking you to solve your giant problems with your tiny resources. He's asking you to bring your tiny resources to him, the one who can multiply them. Your not enough is the perfect starting ingredient for his miracle. Third, this story is a powerful illustration of faith in action. Jesus acted in faith by telling the crowds to sit down. He gave thanks for the food before it was multiplied. And finally, the 12 baskets of leftovers are a beautiful picture of God's abundant provision. With God, there is no scarcity. His resources are infinite. When we give him our little, he not only meets the need, but provides an overflow. He blesses us so that we can be a blessing to others. So today, whatever your 5 loaves and 2 fish situation is, don't focus on the scarcity. Don't be like the disciples who just wanted to send the problem away. Be brave. Bring what little you have to Jesus, place it in his hands, give thanks, and watch what he does with it. You might just find yourself with 12 baskets of leftovers. Thank you for joining me today. If this story has encouraged you, I'd love for you to hit that like button and subscribe for more content that dives deep into the scriptures. See you next time. Let me know in the comments if you love Jesus. I will pray for you. Search for Jesus at Harold Zwaney for the complete library of my Bible study videos. Thank you and God bless.